Hong Kong is Donald Tsang's bribery retrial, which entered day 3 today. Prosecutors said the former chief executive had failed to declare his interest when he was chairing the Executive Council, even though he knew he should have done that. 72-year-old Tsang is accused of accepting free renovations of a Shenzhen penthouse from property tycoon Billy Wong as a kickback for granting Wong's company a radio licence. Prosecutors told the jury that officials should never receive any benefits secretly, but Tsang had deliberately hid his deals with Wong. They said Tsang's misconduct is a kind of corruption. Exactly 3 years ago, tens of thousands of people took to the streets to call for greater democracy in Hong Kong. Even though the 79-day Occupy movement is over, its spirit remains in a number of Hong Kongers, including this group gathered here in Admiralty, the movement's main protest site, to mark the occasion. One of the protest leaders, Tsang made it clear they were never advocating independence. Chan, along with Benny Tai and Chu Yuming, were charged for their role in the movement. Tai and Chu said they're ready to be jailed. Tai said it's unfortunate to see the recent jailing of the young activist, but he's still optimistic about Hong Kong's democratic development. The 2014 demonstration, known also as the Umbrella Movement, paralysed roads in the city's financial district as protesters camped down in tents, demanding the right to democratically elect the chief executive.
I would see it in a more positive way, that we might have young people who are more determined to fight for democracy for Hong Kong, and also they can also get more support in the community when they come out from the prison. With the young people, with that determination, I think I still have hope about Hong Kong's democracy's future.
A warning to mobile payment app users. A study has found security loopholes in many systems, including Samsung Pay and Alipay. Researchers from Chinese universities say users of these mobile applications aren't notified when their transactions are cancelled because the systems only provide one-way data transmission. They've also found that hackers can easily steal consumers' bank account details by disrupting the signal and snatching the money from their accounts. For Samsung Pay, hackers can do that within a 2-metre distance. No loopholes were detected for Apple Pay or Android Pay. Meanwhile, the Ombudsman has launched an investigation into the lack of public charging stations for electric cars. It's estimated there are now more than 10,000 of the vehicles in the city. In 2011, there were fewer than 70. As of last year, Hong Kong had 1,500 public charging stations installed. Ombudsman Connie Lau says it's still a hassle for drivers to find a spot to charge up and contradict government policy. The inquiry will look at ways to improve the situation. A Labor court hearing into the sacking of the Hing Tak school principal has been suspended indefinitely, pending the outcome of a criminal case. Chan Chong-ping made headlines after she was accused of inflating enrolment figures to get more government funding for a school in Chunman, where she was principal. After she was fired, Chan complained that she had been unfairly treated and accused management of breaching employment laws. She's demanding $350,000 in compensation. The judge has adjourned the case indefinitely and ordered Chan and the school board to keep the tribunal informed on the criminal case result. Well, tales of indebted students being driven to suicide have become a commonplace in China in recent years. Some started out borrowing a few $100s from internet loan sharks, only to find themselves owing tens of thousands. And as Samantha Vadas reports, it's sparking public outrage.
I don't dare show these photos to his mother. I'm scared that if she sees them, she won't be able to bear it.
Last year, Fan Ziyi drowned himself. At 20 years old, he owed nearly $20,000 to internet loan sharks after borrowing just $150. Similar stories are becoming ever more common in China, where a surge in violent online lending has resulted in a spate of suicides. The groups specifically target materialistic students who often want money for the latest laptops or smartphones. Chen Ke fell into debt last year. He borrowed $1,500 to buy an iPhone 6S and now owes more than $30,000.
The platform takes 20%, then the agents also take a fee. So if I don't pay on time, they'll threaten me.
The Chinese government is trying to crack down on these online lenders and has suspended them from extending new loans. But with many debts yet to be paid, there are fears the sharks will strike again.
China insists it has comprehensively rolled out strict sanctions on North Korea, even though it's still importing coal from the isolated regime. Figures show Beijing took in 1.6 million tonnes last month, the first lot since February, when it banned fuel purchases from Pyongyang. But the government says the sanctions, which came into effect earlier this month, had a buffer period before taking effect.
China's practice mentioned above is in accordance with the resolutions and China's laws and regulations on foreign trade. China will implement trade exchanges with North Korea in line with domestic laws and international obligations.
Turning now to the death of Otto Warmbier, the US student who was locked up in North Korea for almost 18 months before he died. Pyongyang today issued a statement denying claims of torture after an Ohio coroner reported that Warmbier died from a lack of oxygen and blood to the brain. The coroner also said there's no signs of trauma were found on the 22-year-old's body, but several scars were discovered, including a large irregular one on his right foot. Warmbier's family claims North Korea tortured him, saying his teeth looked as though they'd been rearranged when they first saw him again. The student died in June, shortly after returning to the US. He'd suffered extensive brain damage, although the coroner admits it's hard to know exactly what happened to him.
And the fact that he has anoxic encephalopathy, or brain damage caused by the lack of oxygen to the brain, we don't know what the root cause of that is. There's a couple of ways that you can get that. So you either have to discontinue blood flow to the brain or stop breathing. And what caused either one of those possible events, we wouldn't know. I mean, could that have been torture at the time? We don't know.
Chilean President Michelle Bachelet has slammed Pyongyang for threatening Japan during her meeting with Japanese Prince Akishino and Princess Kiko. That's as they celebrate the 120th friendiversary between the two countries at the presidential palace in Santiago. Tensions in East Asia have escalated over the past 2 months after Pyongyang fired ballistic missiles to Japan twice and conducted its biggest nuclear test on September the 3rd. After giving her warmest welcome to the Japanese royals, Bachelet has reiterated her stance towards North Korea in the ceremony.
Chile certainly repudiates the threatening acts of force that North Korea has made towards Japan. And without a doubt, we will continue working so that hopefully these kinds of situations do not happen again, and so that the world and the planet can continue to strengthen and consolidate peace.
Coming up next, the latest from the world of business. Hong Kong's market has taken a tumble, echoing weakness across the region. The Hang Seng Index fell 0.8%, dipping below 27,500. Analysts say investors are worried China's economic slowdown will be confirmed in a slew of third-quarter data due out in the coming weeks. The energy, tech and telecom sectors all lost more than 1% in today's trading. And in more business news, US markets, meanwhile, spiked on President Trump's new tax plan, which slashes rates for businesses and top earners. But as the saying goes, the devil is, of course, in the detail. And right now, there's no explanation about how tax cuts can be made without driving up the country's debt. Fred Kariyama has more on that story.
President Donald Trump proposed the biggest tax overhaul in 3 decades. He's slashing tax rates on businesses and the rich. He proposes to cut corporate income taxes to 20% from 35%. And for small business owners who are now taxed at the individual income tax rates, a new pass-through tax of 25%. The top tax rate for individuals will be reduced to 35% from nearly 40%, and the plan would roughly double the standard deduction for all taxpayers. But it offers few details on how to pay for the cuts without driving the federal deficit higher. Critics say it falls short of the tax reform Trump had promised on the campaign trail. He had called for a cut in the corporate rate to 15%. UBS Asset Management's Evan Brown says the markets have underpriced the likelihood that the tax legislation would pass.
I think a lot of the market, they were interpreting earlier this year the failure of healthcare legislation as a sign that Washington couldn't get anything done. But in contrast, we actually think that this strengthens the incentives. It strengthens the motivation for Republicans to come together and get it right on tax reform.
Trump badly needs a win. He hasn't had any major legislative successes, even though his Republican Party controls both chambers of Congress.